but it's good of you. As happens when you're moving into your 70th year, I'm going to ramble a tiny bit. And I start with May, June 1968, because it was then a year of hope, a fair amount of fantasy as well as hope. But it was the year when millions of workers in France and the following year in Italy went on strike, and people began to believe in the power of workers' solidarity again. We were momentarily depressed because the 1970 election brought us Ted Heath. I remember sitting watching the telly, we couldn't believe it. And his priority was to disempower the unions. But soon we saw a magnificent response with strikes against the Industrial Relations Acts, one-day stoppages bringing stewards together from different factories. A meeting of, which way is Digba Civic Hall? That way. A meeting in Digba Civic Hall of shop stewards on a Friday or a Saturday could bring groups of workers across Birmingham out the next week. Union strength was developing now, not only in the coalfields and in the traditional industrial areas, but at that time I was in Devon as a trainee social worker, believe it or not, and there were unprecedented strike waves down there as well. There were long strikes in factories in unlikely places such as Newton Abbot and Ottery St Mary, which is basically known as the place where Coleridge put his name in a cave, and a strike that lasted for 3 years at Fine Tubes out by the aerodrome in Plymouth. And they were linked up at the time by a sort of autonomous, spontaneous rank and file movement which called itself the Toll Puddle Group. Now, I didn't come to Birmingham until 1975, so when Saltey Gate occurred and the 72 strike occurred, I was living in Exeter, and we were at an evening socialist meeting and learned about a scab coal ship in the fishing port in Exmouth. The last place you'd expect coal to come in if you go and look at it. We immediately drove to Exmouth and saw more police there than we'd ever seen before, or Exmouth has probably ever seen since. 2 of us followed scab lorries full of coal up the winding 303 road. Anyone who knows it from those days will understand the term winding, to Bristol. And Jana Mintoff, who was daughter of Malta's independence leader, got out at about 3 o'clock in the morning, because we thought we can't follow these all the way across England, and hitched a lift with one of them and persuaded the driver to give her the address in Manchester of precisely where he was taking the coal. I met up with her again at a roadside cafe, and we phoned up people in Manchester and told the NUM who were to intercept lorries, and the NUM then made sure there was a good supply of pickets down to Devon, initially from Wales and then a few later from Kent. Now my assistant Cherry, my partner in crime, is going to give out the leaflet which was given out to the people of Exmouth by the Welsh miners, which is a photocopy of an authentic and very faded leaflet from the strike. One of the things I love about the leaflet is that it says, well, if 100% pay rise is good enough for the Queen, why can't they settle our disputes? It's worth remembering when people talk about flying pickets and so on, there were no mobile phones. Flying pickets could spend a long time lost up minor roads looking for phone boxes to report back to base in the rain and snow. Anyway, all progressive, I say that partly so you get a feel for what people were doing all over the country in solidarity. That was part of my little bit, but also to tell you what the Toll Puddle Group did at the time. Having heard that coal had come in through Exmouth, which had then a very small bridge they opened up to let a ship in, they supplied, sent a bag across which contained a special kit to be used in industrial disputes, and I hope people are taking notes to pass this on to next generations. There was a protractor, like a school protractor, and then there were 2 tubes of araldite with instructions that the Centrac strikers had found this extremely useful with cab lorry drivers who stopped at roadside cafes to gum up all the locks so they couldn't get back into the lorries. And that's what happened to the Exmouth port gates, and the ship was stuck there for considerably longer than intended. Right, in Birmingham in the meantime, where I had a number of friends, the trade union movement, as we've heard, in the factories had sufficient confidence from the one-day stoppages and also from the left leadership that was at the time. You could see in that film Arthur Harper, and he's mentioned in the text, who was president, newly elected, I think, president of the East District and convener of Tractors and Transmissions. And they had the confidence and also some of the recent experience which enabled them to bring people out on strike. Now, I know we're not here to talk about the 1984-85 strike, when I was president of Birmingham TUC and also the Miners' Support Committee, but in terms of describing why we got the mural painted upstairs, it's important to mention some of that experience. We were trying at the time to, against the tide, to build here a trade union studies centre. In fact, they were going to close the neighbouring building. We fought to keep it open, and for me it's a great source of irony that now it's the headquarters for the college when we had to persuade them to keep the old, what had been an old board school, open. We took over a number of rooms in the place. People said, how did you manage to get a trade union studies centre so quick? And having won the battle to keep the building open, I had a request from one of the carpentry teachers whether there was any project he could give to his students. Just a little project they could do, and these were sort of pre-entry students, so it didn't have to be terribly complicated. And I was thinking about what I might have that he could do, and I was driving back from somewhere, and there was a program about Joe Orton, the playwright, where he said the English would give the power of arrest to traffic lights. So I had in my head, I need something, I need to keep the centre going, and power of arrest to traffic lights. So I got the carpenter to get them to make little plaques saying trade union studies and drill 2 holes in and give me 2 screws, because I could just about manage that. And we took over 5 rooms by the process of sticking on the door these plaques saying trade union studies. And when the timetabling coordinator came round, he said, oh, I can see you've been allotted these rooms, we won't give them to anyone else. And just a tip there, that with a bit of gall you can get quite a long way. Now, what did we learn from the 1984-85 strike? It taught us the power of workers in solidarity, and obviously from the 72 and 74 strikes. But particularly the 84-5 strike taught us the violence of the state. 11,000 arrested, 7,000 injured, 1,000, more than 1,000 I think, sacked, 8,000 police, probably other people in different uniforms normally at Orgreave. It taught us about the bias in the media and the law, the strength of women's organisation, the importance of leadership, the role of traitors. We had a march in the 84-85 strike from Saltey Gate to the centre of town, and someone had painted up, I don't no idea who it was, of course, painted up some of the brick walls on the old buildings coming down. And one of them, mindful of the fact that the then president of the TUC, Lionel Murray, had told regional TUCs they couldn't organise solidarity action, it had Len the Rat. And for years, if you went past there, it said Len the Rat on the wall. It's probably been demolished now. But if it hasn't, I hope it has a preservation order on it. Anyway, the role of traitors, the essential support of oppressed groups. We've seen the film Pride, but in Birmingham, in particular, black workers and also the miners linking with the Keyworth strikers in the dispute. Much of this, as it relates to Birmingham, of course, a little plug, is to be found in the book Birmingham and the Miners' Strike. Last time I looked through Amazon, it costs about 35 quid now, but it did cost 5 quid at the time. We also learned that solidarity doesn't just happen, it has to be built. It's hard work for leaders at local level to organise. We learned how community of purpose erodes racism and bigotry. We learned the importance of music, the arts, humour to the struggle. We learned that collectively people can transform their lives. We learned that defeat just means we've got to be better prepared for next time, and that comrades in struggle are comrades for life. Now, there's about 13 or 14 points there. I could give multiple examples to illustrate each point. We, for example, comrades in struggle are comrades for life. We in Birmingham related to the Midlands pits and the Welsh pits mainly. Initially, I'm from Kent. But every Christmas, the person who used to work in the lamp room at Mardy pit in Wales phoned us up to wish us a happy Christmas, 38, well, however many years it is later, 35 years later. We kept in touch with the North Staff's women singers for years. We went to the 60th birthday of one of the young miners who stayed here all through the strike. And in our house we had 5 miners, 4 or 5 each week. His name was Pete Clements, who I regret to inform you died recently. He was from my steg in Wales. On the subject of music, after pioneer work by Banner Theatre, we would busk in the city centre by Marks and Spencer's and sing all kinds of songs which weren't terribly poetic. Most of them were musical slogans, though we had a nice miners' version of The Laughing Policeman. For which we were suitably bedecked. And if you go now to Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, you'll find there were 4 of these I still had. One of them is now in the art gallery as an exhibit alongside, for example, a collecting jacket which Jill Smith, who was a lollipop lady in King's Heath, collected every Friday night, Saturday, any other time she could really. Her jacket, which she was into North American beadwork, and one side is North American beadwork, but the other side is 100 badges to do with the miners' strike. That's in the museum and art gallery, and hopefully will inspire people for the future. We here in the Trade Union Studies Centre, when Birmingham TUC had a resource centre and various satellite projects as well, a number of us, to mention a few, Avtar Joel, who was General Secretary of the Indian Workers Association, Teresa Daly, who ended up working at the TUC before she retired, Heather Stretton, who's an NEU regional official for this area, just to name a few, were working here as tutors. And in addition to delivering the TUC and union courses, we wanted the Trade Union Studies Centre to pass on the lessons of the miners' strike and the spirit of resistance that they encapsulated, not least to prepare people for battles to come. So Avatar and I went to meet David Bainbridge, who at the time was an art lecturer at Stourbridge College, later it merged into Wolverhampton. And he was also Secretary of Stourbridge Trades Council, and we arranged for 2 of his students to come and do a series of murals of workers at work, West Midlands workers. That's on display in one of the rooms up here, those 4 murals. They used to be across the top of the building, inside, not outside, obviously. We'd been reading about Diego Rivera and his mural movement, and we wanted to replicate some of that here. The next year, we commissioned the Saltey Gate mural to adorn the wall at the end of what was the Trades Union Studies canteen, painted on board by someone called Dan Hinchcliffe. I learned today he's now Dr. Dan Hinchcliffe, to celebrate the power of solidarity. Cherry has a picture here of when Arthur came to a meeting, a May Day meeting, which was because the Trades Council and May Day meetings used to be held here, where Arthur came to, I don't know what you did, baptised or something, the mural, blessed it, after it had been up for a year or so. I was pleased. I'll just let people get this, because this is anyway, so when you came into the building, of which by now I had the keys and was head, you would see straight ahead of you this mural, which you're getting a picture of. If you look up to the left, you'll see some of the other murals which I mentioned just now. Unfortunately, John Major got back and they implemented what was called the incorporation of colleges. I left the Trade Union Studies Centre, which is like semi-privatisation. I left the Trade Union Studies Centre here and went to work as a regional official for the union. And the principal decided that this building really needed, the act needed to be cleaned up or tempered or calmed down or whatever. And they took down the Saltey Gate mural. For a number of years there were 2 or 3 pictures with bits of it in, and nobody was quite sure where the rest of it was. So I was delighted tonight to discover that they've now reassembled it, albeit round the corner, in a classroom upstairs. The sad bit is that if you look at the picture, you can see the police marching off here when they gave up. And you can't see it very well, but there's a very sad horse as well, with his head hanging down, which kind of symbolised the mood of the police at the time. Unfortunately, that panel seems to be missing. I think we should offer a reward to anyone who can find it. Our intention with the mural was that the lessons I outlined just now could be passed on to future generations, that people would say, what was that? What happened there? Why are all those people out there outside this gate holding up something like "We support the miners"? And that it enabled us to discuss with them some of the lessons. It has to be said that without the 72 victory, we may not have had a 70s Labour government, because it rolled into the 74 victory, which brought down Ted Heath. Thatcherism could have arrived earlier. My view is that whilst it's lovely to see it up here, one day I'd like the mural to be reassembled and displayed publicly, perhaps in the art gallery or a museum, perhaps near Marks and Spencer's, where we used to sing every Saturday collecting money in the '84 strike, or in a new union centre to encourage all those exploited in the gig economy to educate, agitate and organise. Just before the last election, quite by mistake, I wrote a song which the chorus was, "And we're all voting Labour," and it ended, "For the many, not the few." Anyway, after the election result, the people in our area phoned me up and said, "We need another song for the situation, we're all feeling pretty depressed." So I'll just give you a little bit. The election may be lost, but the war is far from finished, and no matter what the cost, our commitment's undiminished. For the many, not the few, we will organise together, as socialists always do. We will organise together for the many, not the few. Thank you very much.